Well, in the past week, we have seen some huge wins in favor of the Constitution, in favor of we the people, in favor of our rights, and rulings that are getting us further away from the administrative state. And one of them in particular that didn't get a lot of play, to be honest, was Chevron Deference. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about Trump's immunity trial, or his the immunity case that went in front of the Supreme Court. They ruled in his favor, another huge win. But we're also going to talk about Joe Biden and how the Democrat Party is falling apart, how authoritarianism is falling apart. All of these things are good, and it feels like in this world, it's so seldom that I get to report and get to talk to you about good news, and this is one of those weeks. And so I'm very, very happy about it. Let's go ahead and talk about it. I'm Jared. This is Continue Freedom. Okay, all you big, beautiful patriots, welcome back to Continue Freedom. If this is your first time here, welcome aboard. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave comments below. We're on X, Locals, Rumble, and YouTube. I'm going to add a quick little plug here. If you happen to like this t-shirt, go ahead and pop on over to continuefreedom.com, sign up for my mailing list, and you will be one of the first ones to be notified when I release the merch. This is a t-shirt that I actually designed years ago. I used to design t-shirts. I had my own little side hustle. It was a small thing, and I'm revamping that now, and I'm bringing it back in a big, big way. So go to continuefreedom.com, sign up for my mailing list, and you'll get notified as soon as it's released. And we will have tumblers, we will have hats and mugs and anything you could think of. T-shirts, obviously, hoodies, all the good stuff. So go over there and sign up. Now, the first thing we are going to talk about, this is huge. So everybody's probably heard about this, but if you haven't, Trump immunity case. The Supreme Court rules that ex-presidents have substantial protection from prosecution. This is essentially upending special counsel Jack Smith's election interference case against former President Trump. And in the majority, Chief Justice Roberts wrote, "The president is not above the law, but Congress may not criminalize the president's conduct in carrying out the responsibilities of the executive branch under the Constitution." Okay? And the system of separated powers designated by the framers has always demanded an energetic, independent executive. The president, therefore, may not be prosecuted for exercising his core constitutional powers, and he is entitled, at a minimum, to presumptive immunity from prosecution for all his official acts. That immunity applies equally to all occupants of the Oval Office, regardless of politics, policy, or party. Very, very, very reasonable and completely understandable. If you break the law, if you do something outside in the carrying out of your official responsibilities as the chief executive, you can still be found guilty of things that are illegal or unconstitutional. Therefore, my understanding is we can still prosecute President Obama for assassinating American citizens on foreign soil without due process. But none of the things that Donald Trump actually did violated his official duties as the president of the United States. This is we have to understand where we were in this case is contorting official responsibilities in order to try to get a prosecution. What President Biden did was quite obvious to everybody. Doesn't matter who you are, even as the chief executive, you can't execute American citizens without due process. He did that, so we're still good to go for that if we ever get somebody that has the cojones to carry it out. But President Trump, they were having to fabricate things and contort the law and contort the Constitution in order to try to make this stick. So in the dissent, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Ketanji Brown Jackson, they said, relying on little more than its own misguided wisdom about the need for, quote, bold and unhesitating action by the president, the court gives former President Trump all the immunity he asked for and more. Because our Constitution does not shield the former president from answering for criminal and treasonous acts, I dissent. So I think the verbiage in here, because of the people that did this, Kagan, Sotomayor, and Jackson, these people are ginning up the base, and they effectively did in their dissent by saying treasonous actions. He did not commit any treasonous actions, but nonetheless, this was all messaging, right? It was messaging on their part to speak out to their base, who is going to parrot this and contort this and twist this in every possible way that they could. One such person is Harry Sisson. Harry Sisson is a 21-year-old. His brain is not fully developed. He is a babyface no life experience child who was hired by the Democrat Party, who was paid by the Democrat Party to essentially go on Twitter and spout nonsense on a daily basis. And he said, according to the Supreme Court, Biden could now send in SEAL Team 6 and take all of them out. He could send in military to take out Trump. He has immunity for official acts now. So the call on Twitter was for him to be investigated because he was threatening to assassinate the president of the United States. I don't think necessarily that was the case. He had a lot of other rhetoric that really towed that line, but people were saying, all right, here you go, calling for violence against the president. Go after Harry Sisson. Harry Sisson is a child. Harry Sisson is basically a useful idiot, and there are several of those. There are several useful idiots out there for the Democrat Party, and I feel bad for them, honestly, because I think that they're either swayed by money or they're just swayed by an ideology that is, I mean, it's corrupt at its very core, but they have found some validation in that. And Brian Krasenstein is another person, and so they've essentially been, I mean, I'm not gonna go there. I had something in my notes here. I'm not gonna say that. Harry Sisson did essentially call for the extrajudicial killing of the Supreme Court and the president. But again, he's just a paid front man. He's a paid child who shouldn't be taken seriously. But unfortunately, because people are driven by ideology, they are driven by messaging from their superiors, i.e. the people in the Democrat Party. They don't really care who it's coming from. They just need the validation. They need the validation that it is true. But I will say that in the dissenting opinion also, Justice Alito, he wrote, now if an incumbent who loses a very close, hotly contested election knows that a real possible nullity after leaving office is not that the president is going to be able to go off into peaceful retirement, but that the president may be criminally prosecuted by a bitter political opponent. Alito asked, will that not lead to us in a cycle that destabilizes the functioning of our country as a democracy? And we can look, I hate that he called it a democracy and not a republic, but, and we can look around the world and find countries where we have seen this process, where the loser gets thrown in jail. That is exactly the process that we have been going through ever since Trump came out of office. We have seen an unrelenting attack by the DOJ, by the Democrat Party, by the establishment, by the elites who are trying to put their political opposition in prison, not because he served as the president, because he still has one term left, and they do not want the choice of the people, which so far is Donald Trump, to be elected. This is the precedent that has been set. Now, Justice Clarence Thomas, he also penned a concurrence with the majority, and he said, in this case, the Attorney General purported to appoint a private citizen as special counsel to prosecute a former president on behalf of the United States. But I am not sure that any office for the special counsel has been established by law as the Constitution requires. By requiring that Congress create federal offices by law, the Constitution imposes an important check against the president. He cannot create offices at his pleasure. If there is no law establishing the office that the special counsel occupies, then he cannot proceed with his prosecution. Because if this process isn't followed, Jack Smith is nothing more than a private citizen. And Clarence Thomas goes on to say, a private citizen cannot criminally prosecute anyone, let alone a former president. I mean, this is common sense. This makes perfect sense to anybody with two functioning brain cells. And yet, people are going nuts. And when I say people, I'm talking about the left. People are going absolutely nuts. Elizabeth Warren demands that we expand the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court, how dare they deviate from the Democrat Party? How dare they deviate from our worldview? Therefore, we need to expand it so that we can cram the court. And if we can get this done really fast, maybe we can do it before Joe Biden is sent to hospice care. I don't know. I mean, it's crazy. So Elizabeth Warren has criticized the Supreme Court following a week of rulings handed down by the justices, with the Massachusetts senator claiming the highest court in the land was a threat to democracy and called on Congress to add more seats. Now, part of this, I think, is posturing because adding more seats to Congress, you're not going to even get enough Democrat support to do that at this point. However, I believe after a Donald Trump presidency, that is absolutely what we will have to contend with. If 4 more years of Donald Trump upending the system, putting all these people in a tailspin, and we're going to talk about what demographics are in the biggest tailspin, but all these people will be put into a tailspin, and you will start to get support for stacking the Supreme Court in favor of the Democrat Party. Now, Elizabeth Warren is not some great thinker. She is not some great representative of the Democrat Party. In fact, she and Mazie Hirono are, and I would put, I just forgot the guy's name. Is it Hank Johnson? I think these are some of the Democrats. These are some of the dumber people that reside inside of that party. However, they get a lot of play. They get a lot of play. And okay, so she says her comments were met with mixed reactions. Some users agreed, and this is users on X, while others suggested we would not be saying such things if the court had ruled in ways she agreed with. So this one guy, he said, so you want to pack the court because it doesn't favor your party. Adding more justices could set a risky precedent, potentially leading to further political manipulation of the court. To be a fair and balanced system, what we have now is good. What we have now is working. What we have now is acceptable. That does not mean that they make the right decision all the time. Just a couple of days ago, I was criticizing them for the decisions they were making. But every now and then, they make some huge, huge wins, and it restores some rights to the people. What we have to do is get them to make all the right decisions, and we have to stop putting politically swayed people like Ketanji Brown Jackson or Kagan or Sotomayor. We have to get all these people. I mean, we need just constitutionalists on the Supreme Court at the end of the day. But that's not the reality of our politics. So in the short term, this is another quote. She says, we must prevent Donald Trump from returning to the White House and enacting Project 2025. And in the long term, we must keep fighting to reform the Supreme Court, get corruption out of Washington, and restore our democracy. Elizabeth Warren calling for the end to corruption from a millionaire who's making a public servant's salary. Yes, I agree. We should end corruption. But nonetheless, they are absolutely unhinged about this. And it's interesting to see. So how do they think they're going to get by all of these Supreme Court decisions? How are they going to get to the point where they can, pack the Supreme Court? Well, they're going to get Joe Biden elected or Kamala Harris or somebody else. But before we get to that, let's go ahead and talk about one more huge Supreme Court win. And we're going to talk about the Chevron Deference. Chevron Deference is something that didn't get a lot of play, but it should have, because it's a win for us, for we the people. Chevron Deference, if you don't know, is essentially what has given the administrative state the bulk of its power over the past 40 years. And this happened back in 1984. And they ruled essentially that when there's gaps in legislation, those administrative authorities, i.e. the ATF or the EPA, they can make their own decisions on how that is interpreted and how that is enforced. And so since 1984, we have had unelected bureaucrats creating what essentially are laws cut by memo, and they can change the course of property development. They can change the course of, they can turn, let's use this as a great example, bump stocks, pistol braces. You can turn millions, tens of millions of Americans into felons overnight. You can do something like, let's use a hypothetical. Actually, this isn't hypothetical. This happened in my family. The EPA being able to say, this property is now a wetlands. But the person that I know in my family said, I dug an irrigation ditch for my field. Doesn't matter. It's a wetlands. You can't develop this property. If you start to develop it, you will incur penalties and fines. So we are going to stop you from developing your own property, the property that your family has owned for decades. We are going to stop you from doing that and give you penalties and fines if you violate our edict, simply because we determined this place to be a wetland. And this isn't just in my family. I sympathize with the people out there who have had this happen to them, but I've read other stories of the similar things happening. And they can then therefore put undue burdens on property owners simply because some pissed off bureaucrat in white tennis shoes and a clipboard says that is the case. This is massive, massive power that for 40 years that has been wielded over the American people. And because Chevron Deference has been overturned, it has restored rights to us. And Democrats say this is going to cause instability. It's going to cause instability in the system. Yes, it is. Yes, it absolutely is. This is called disrupting the deep state. This is disrupting the administrative state, and that is a good thing for we the people. The Supreme Court in a 6-3, this is from BBC. So let's go to obviously a very nonpartisan source here, but we're going to go ahead and read this anyway because I like to show multiple sources. How about that? The Supreme Court in a 6-3 vote killed a legal precedent that conservatives have attacked for decades, known as Chevron Deference. Today, the court places a tombstone on Chevron. No one can miss. Judge Neil Gorsuch, one of the most conservative members, wrote. I love reading this stuff from a leftist point of view. The deference, set in 1984, is a case involving the oil giant, gave federal agencies wide powers to interpret laws and decide the best ways to apply them. No, this is why, if people say, well, it errs on the side of ambiguity. It should be erring on our favor or in our favor if they write laws that are ambiguous, because you don't want to give unelected people the width and breadth necessary to leverage that power to subjugate the people, right? That makes perfect sense. So you got to be specific. You got to be hyper-specific. And this is how, by the way, in a positive way, that gun manufacturers have been able to get around some stupid rules because they have to write it hyper-specific. When they write it hyper-specific and they can find some way around those hyper-specific regulations, it requires them to continue to chase those regulations and create new laws and do this, all that stuff. But that is better than having unelected bureaucrats leveraging the power of their agencies against we, the people, period. And so in ending the deference, the conservative majority court has slashed and severely weakened the powers of agencies, including the Environmental Protection Agency. Yes, an agency that should not even exist any longer. That along with the Department of Education, should be completely wiped out. The aftershock of such a seismic decision will be felt throughout the federal government. Let's take a look at how we got here. And so this stemmed, and the case that they were looking at stemmed from monitors on fishing boats, and I'm kind of paraphrasing. I can go back through here and get a little bit more specific, but essentially monitors had to be on certain fishing boats. And it used to be that the fishermen didn't have to pay for those monitors, but then the federal government said, no, you do have to pay for those monitors. And it was something like $700 a day. Those fishermen couldn't pay that fine, couldn't pay that amount, so they had to shut down their business. And this is the deep state. This is the administrative state, rather, going full bore and saying, we're going to put this burden, even though the taxpayers are giving us, 10%, 20%, 30%, 50%, 60% of their money. We need more because for some reason we don't have the money to pay these monitors, or at least we want to defer the cost to the taxpayers. And those taxpayers lost their businesses. And the Supreme Court said, this is wrong. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's been so long since we have seen federal agencies shrink. And when Donald Trump came out and said, hey, if you want to bring me, if you want to add new laws or add new regulations, you got to bring me some regulations that you're going to cut. That got me, I was doing cheetah flips. And I thought, we haven't seen that in decades. I don't think we've seen that in my lifetime that I'm aware of. Maybe we have. But this sent Democrats, obviously, into a tailspin. So their only hope is to re-seize power. They have, or maintain power at least, by getting Joe Biden or somebody else back into the presidency, by getting him to uphold the administrative state, to bolster the administrative state. Well, instead, what do we have? The dam is breaking. Pressure builds on Capitol Hill for Biden to step aside. Biden is losing. And it's not just Biden, by the way. So I'll give you this one right here. So this is a electoral map based on the recent Open Labs polling data. 333 to 205, which is beautiful. That is wonderful. That's great. I love it. But Biden is not, he's not, here's another one. CNN post-debate poll. Trump 49, Biden 43. If it's Trump-Harris, it's 47-45. If it's Trump-Newsom, it's 48-43. If it's Trump-Buttigieg, it's 47-43. If it's Trump-Whitmer, it's 47-42. There's no, at this point, if polls are correct, and we saw during the primaries that polls were generally lining up with the results of the primaries. So we can assume that they are relatively accurate. I don't think the pollsters could really stand much more of the garbage polls that we got like in 2016. I mean, everybody remembers 2016. That's why a lot of people don't trust polls now. In 2016, everything said that Hillary was going to win. Everything. It was unanimous. Trump had no chance. And he blew her out of the water because she's a terrible candidate, of course. But aside from that, the pollsters got it so wrong that they lost a lot of credibility. And they have been, I believe, working back to try to gain some sort of credibility. And when we look at the primaries, we saw that they were pretty accurate. They were very close, most of them within the margin of error. But the Democrat Party, this is, I'll read this from Axios. Let me pull up my overlay here again. Apologize for that. Let's do this one here. So they say the dam is breaking, pressure builds on Capitol Hill for Biden to step aside. President Biden is staring down a growing consensus among frustrated and weary congressional Democrats that he should abandon his reelection bid, a sentiment that could soon spill out into public view. It's already in public view, could spill out into public view. Everybody that watched the debate knows that he should step aside. But a lot of Republicans are saying, and myself included, I say, I kind of wish that he would stay in, because if there's a second presidential debate and a similar Joe Biden to what we saw in the last debate shows up, we have more or less sealed our victory, unless they get enough of the 8 to 14 to 20 million, however many immigrants have come across, to vote appropriately. Unless that happens, they're not going to be able to cheat their way out of the next election, and the landslide for Donald Trump is going to be too big to overcome. But several House Democrats described to Axios, this is from Axios, so I'm not pulling this from right-wing sources, by the way, significant movement just on Wednesday, with one saying that, quote, over the last few hours, I am starting to hear from delegates that they really love Joe, but want him to step aside. The dam is breaking, said another Democrat lawmaker. A third House Democrat said Biden should step down and help lead a transition of candidacy, and that a very large majority of the caucus shares this sentiment. A fourth lawmaker said House Democrats have been inundated by nervous constituents and stakeholders in their districts this week. So many people are telling us he can't win, he's got to withdraw. It is an absolute state of panic. And if it looked like this, if you were looking at an electoral map that looked like this, of course you'd be saying, bro, you got no chance. 205 to 333, that is an absolute shellacking. But who's going to step up? Who are the options? I mean, we can look at that poll I was showing you a while ago. I mean, you've got Biden. If he's not in there, you could have Harris. Oops, let me show it to you. We've got Harris, Newsom, Buttigieg, Whitmer, all terrible, terrible candidates. Terrible candidates. All you have to do is sit there and read off stats about Gavin Newsom's reign as California governor, and the guy's going to be toast. I mean, it might be an oversimplification, because there's a lot of people that would vote for a Democrat no matter what. I mean, as long as they've got a pulse, they're all right. But who's the person that's actually going to take over? Well, confidential polling memo shows Biden decline and Harris ascent. Kamala Harris? Are you kidding me? So a growing number of Democrats are calling for President Joe Biden to end his 2024, this is from SCNR, re-election bid after his widely criticized performance in last week's CNN debate against former President Donald Trump. Less than a week after the debate, a confidential polling memo circulating among Democrats reveals a sharp decline in Biden's support in key battleground states. The memo, attained by Puck News, indicates that voter defections are so severe that Biden risks losing New Hampshire, Virginia, and New Mexico. He's going to lose Virginia. And I used to live in Virginia. I did a video years ago about it, and it is this massive sea of red. But when you get into the East Coast, especially when you get up near DC, you get into Nova, all those areas, they are rich, dark blue. And yet Joe Biden could lose Virginia. He's doing so bad. That's bad. New Hampshire's bad too. New Mexico is bad too. But Virginia is one that even though they've got a Republican governor, I feel that for the presidency, it's always been a pretty strong Democrat showing. That's just my personal, experience. But nonetheless, so Kamala Harris. And, we saw it here too. Kamala Harris is on the verge of making a move on Joe Biden. So she's thinking about it. There's people saying it needs to be somebody else. It needs to not be, or it doesn't need to be Joe Biden. It needs to be someone else. Kamala Harris checks a lot of boxes. She really, really does. And I'll show this same clip that I showed, or the same poll that I showed the other day. This is before the presidential election, or the presidential debate. But white women with degrees, 64% support Joe Biden. Crazy. Now, the latest stat shows that it's moved down to 58%. So after the debate, he lost 6 points, which is huge. That's a monstrous drop. So, but women are typically voting for Joe Biden, and that's problematic. That's always going to be problematic. But I happened to get some exclusive footage, some very exclusive footage of Kamala Harris. And, for people that think that she should be the nominee, this is groundbreaking stuff here. You're going to have to check this out. But this is the former vice president on a whirlwind tour explaining to people, her policy prescriptions, explaining to people how she is going to carry America forward without Joe Biden, or as the new president, rather.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What we can see, what we believe can be unburdened by what has been.
What 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 can be unburdened by what has been.
Who we can be unburdened by who we have been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
Where we can be unburdened by where we have been, and unburdened by where we are right now.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be.
The width and breadth of her eloquence it knows no bounds. So this is the person that's going to replace Joe Biden. Of course. I mean, there might be people that will, fall for that sort of thing. Now, I did get a take. She did a hot take here. This is pretty good. And it's of her talking about one of the biggest issues that we're facing right now, which is the Russia-Ukraine war. And so Kamala Harris answered this. I mean, it was a really, really good response. So I think it's worth us, listening to it. But go ahead and listen to this.
And what's going on, and how can this directly affect the people of the United States?
So Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia is a powerful country. Russia decided to invade a smaller country called Ukraine. So basically, that's wrong.
Oh. Hard-hitting data on the Russia-Ukraine situation. This is their best hope. I'm sorry, but it was that's fantastic. This is their best hope right now. And from what I can tell, she's polling relatively high when it comes to, all the other options. Trump Harris is at 45. I mean, she's the highest among the others. Trump Biden, she's even beating Biden at this point. This is how much the guy has lost. So, if that's their best hope, I think that's probably our best option as well as conservatives. But it is going to suck a lot of the female vote over towards the Democrat Party because, as I said before, white women with degrees, for whatever reason, I don't know. I don't know. But as long as we've got people like these guys that are getting listened to, Harry Sisson and what's his name? Brian Krasenstein. These are the paid operatives that are out there on a daily basis, filling up people's Twitter feeds with nonsense, things that I don't believe they truly believe themselves, but they are just paid operatives saying, this is how you should think. Trump is evil. Trump is evil. Yes, the economy's bad. Yes, our country is in collapse. Yes, our legal system is being abused. Yes, the administrative state is holding down entrepreneurs and business owners and private citizens. Yes, we have authoritarian. Yes, we have fascism in America as we speak. But you still got to vote for the same people that are doing it, because that orange man sends really mean tweets that offend me at 2:30 in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning. Crazy. So all that to say, this is a good news day, because a win for the Constitution, a couple of wins for the Constitution, a win, potential win for November. And there you go. That makes me happy. And that's right at about 30 minutes, a little over. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave comments below. We're on X Locals, Rumble, and YouTube. You can also go to continuefreedom.com, sign up for the mailing list, so when I put out this killer merch, you guys can get a hold of some of it. Thank you all so much. Love you guys, and I'll see you in the next show.